the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. It's estimated that in addition to destroying homes and lives, Hurricane Helene flooded 23,000 cars, trucks, and SUVs in our state. 5 on Your Side has been following what happened to these cars in the 6 months since the storm and whether they ended up in the hands of scammers trying to resell them to unsuspecting buyers. That story airs tonight on WRAL. Here to walk me through this reporting is 5 on Your Side producer Pritchard. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so obviously it's impossible to follow all 23,000 of these cars. So how did you follow this and keep an eye on what was happening here?
Yeah, so what we did is we actually found a few cars that were up for auction online that were listed as Helene flooded vehicles, and we just marked those. We followed them through the auction process. We worked with Carfax to kind of track what happened to these vehicles, when their vehicle history was updated. We checked some other free and available sources that are on the internet, which we are providing links to in our story on WRAL.com, just to kind of see what happened. What's the process that these things go through? We asked questions to the DMV and some other agencies because we know that scammers take these flooded vehicles, try to turn them around and sell them to people who, after they're cleaned up, they can't tell that they've been flooded. So we just wanted to go through that process, see what had been happening, and check in with 4 vehicles that we found for auction to see what happened.
Okay. And what is supposed to happen once insurance totals a flooded car?
So there's a couple of routes that this can take. One is, let's say that your car was flooded. You take the insurance claim, but you want to keep the car. The insurance company would then send the DMV a form saying, we paid it out, but it's been flooded. You need to update the title. Owner pays a few bucks, has the title corrected, and then from there it's up to the owner to do whatever they want with the vehicle. There's another path where if the owner doesn't take the insurance claim, if they don't file with their insurance and they just want to sell the vehicle, they can. They just have to disclose that the vehicle has been flooded to the buyer. That did happen in this case. That's how these vehicles were advertised as Helene flooded vehicles. And then, from there, it's up to the new owner to file that title, register it, and that's when things kind of get updated online in those vehicle history reports as a flood-damaged vehicle, and that's when those markers come on.
Okay. And so, like you said, you started following these cars when they were already up for auction. So what happened to the vehicles that you followed from there?
Yeah, so 3 of them, this process went basically as you'd expect. They were sold, and it took a few weeks, but the titles were eventually registered with the North Carolina DMV, and they were updated and noted as flooded vehicles. There was one vehicle that was sold but has never been registered again. And we aren't exactly sure what happened to that vehicle. But it's been about 4 months now that we've been tracking that one since it's been sold. It's never been registered with the North Carolina DMV. It hasn't been registered anywhere else. And the title has not been updated or branded as flooding. And that is something that worries experts. And, it's a little bit about what we talked about with Carfax during this report.
Okay. Let's take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back. So before the break, you were saying, there's this car, don't really know why it hasn't been re-registered and all of that. Could be, I would assume, any number of reasons. Yes. So let's start with maybe what might be like a good faith reason. Would it be maybe because it was scrapped for parts or something like that? Yep,
certainly could be. Could have been scrapped for parts. It could be being restored, and they just haven't registered it. If somebody's not driving it on the road, they wouldn't register it with the DMV. There could be any number of reasons. Again, like you said, good faith reasons for why it hasn't been registered with the DMV. We just know that, not only in North Carolina, but nationwide, it hasn't shown up on any of the other registry sites.
Okay. And so then on the other side of that coin, how could a scammer take advantage if the DMV hasn't, had this car re-registered as being flooded in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, so they could take it out of the state to a state that has some more lax title laws where there's less proof that is needed to register a vehicle and keep that title clean. We were in our conversation with Carfax. They said that these flooded vehicles can be cleaned up for a few $100s to make it look like they are in good condition and hide that flood damage, and then be sold to unsuspecting buyers for thousands more than they should be. And these cars can develop a lot of problems. They can issues with electrical. Cars have so many electrical components now. Everything is computer driven. That stuff corrodes and breaks down over time. Even if, a scammer could get it working long enough for them to sell it to you, that's going to break down over time. There are going to be parts inside of the car that are going to rust and cause issues down the road. And, we talked about that with Carfax and some of the ways to kind of look out for that kind of damage and what to look for. And some of the other questions that you should be asking as well.
Okay. And do we know, why there may have been a delay here? Or do we know maybe a bigger question, since you said this is the kind of thing that can be concerning to experts, whether this is a widespread issue with the other cars that have been flooded by Helene?
Right. And there may be a little bit of a delay in registering some vehicles, but it still should only take a few weeks. So, once somebody takes possession of a vehicle, registers it with the DMV, it shouldn't take long before those vehicle history reports start updating, so you know what you're buying if you're going to a dealership. Now, that doesn't mean that private party or dealership, you should just trust what somebody's telling you. Always do your homework, do your own investigation. But there may be a little bit of a backlog because of how many vehicles were flooded during Helene and other storms during the year. But it shouldn't be such a big deal that you can't figure out what has happened to a vehicle that was damaged 6 or 8 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And, for car buyers, what do they need to know to protect themselves?
Yeah, so there are definitely things that you want to look for. Any kind of stained carpet, any kind of smells, something smell too really bad or really good, like somebody's trying to cover something up. Looking for, again, rust, checking all of the electronics. Does everything work right? All the windows, open the hatches, try everything, every button you can find. Just kind of test that out to make sure that it's working. And there are some other kind of step-by-step things that we go through in the story. There's some things to ask, too, of a private seller especially, that if they won't do, that's something that's a red flag, and I'll leave that one for the story tonight.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your reporting on this.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us a part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.